All right, guys, we're live inside the DC newsroom here. Welcome to Fox 5 Live on this Wednesday. I'm looking at the date, March 27th, 2018. A lot of live stuff to get to right now, so I don't want to spend too much time here in the newsroom. But first of all, welcome to the show. We're going to be tracking all the latest live events, anything breaking that we have coming in. A couple big stories today. Right now, we have coming in the funeral for Lieutenant Michael Davidson, guys. He was the young FDNY firefighter, 15-year vet, actually, of the force, who died on Friday morning while fighting a fire in Harlem that was actually in a building on the movie set that was being filmed. It was a movie set that included actors like Bruce Willis, Willem Dafoe, Alec Baldwin. It was being filmed, and he died in that fire from smoke inhalation. So I want to get to that funeral soon because we do have it streaming live. You can see right here, a live look inside our newsroom as we're working hard to get these stories to you. Right now, Bill de Blasio is up on the stand. I see it right now, Mayor of New York City, speaking on behalf, talking about Michael Davidson and his family and honoring him in his own words. So we're going to throw it right over there, but I also want to quickly tease out, we're also going to be talking about the Alton Sterling case. This was a 37-year-old black man who was shot at very close range by Baton Rouge police in July 2016. It was later found out that the police thought he was reaching for a gun before they shot him, but he was showing a gun to a homeless man who approached him for money, and there was a scuffle involved. Anyway, there was an update from the lawyer in this case, Attorney General Jeff Landry in Louisiana, about that. And it just happened moments ago, so we do have it on tape for you. We'll show you that in a little bit, but let's jump over to this funeral while the mayor of New York is speaking about Lieutenant Davidson. Here it is, guys, live from New York City.
He was a cornerstone of his company as the Nozzle Man, a cornerstone of his wonderful community, Floral Park, a firefighter's firefighter, an example to everyone, someone the rookies looked up to and learned from, the embodiment of the term the bravest. But nowhere was he more in a cornerstone, nowhere was he more devoted than when it came to his family. Michael's father told me at the wake that family always came first. To Michael's children, to Brooke, to Joseph, to Emily, to Amy. This is a difficult, painful, confusing time. For young people, there's so much to wonder about. Let me offer you a personal thought. I had a dad who wore a uniform and served with pride as well. Lost him too early in life as well. One thing you will find is you will remember your father as a hero. You will remember his goodness. In your own moments of challenge, in your moments of doubt, your father will be there with you. You will know who he was. You'll know what he did for others. You'll know what an imprint he left on this earth, and that will sustain you. He will never leave you. And that is something we can say about all the good men and women of the FDNY. They never leave us. They never shy away from the danger. They are there for us no matter what. I would conclude with a vignette that struck me on Friday evening, standing in front of the site of this tragedy with Commissioner Nigro and Chief Leonard. We were looking at the building, and a woman approached us from the neighborhood, and she had tears in her eyes, and her voice was halting. And she said, "I just want all of you to know how thankful we are for the firefighters and what they do for us." I want to express that gratitude on behalf of all 8.5 million New Yorkers, and my profound condolences to the Davidson family, to the FDNY, to all who knew and loved Michael. God bless you all.
Every firefighter wants the nozzle, even the ones in the truck. When they're honest, they'll admit it too. Every firefighter wants that moment of battling a fire, pushing it back, and feeling when you ultimately defeat it. As a probie, you long for that first chance. It's one of the core tasks of our department, saving life and property by literally fighting fire. It's a skill honed over time and using our most important tool. And those who battled alongside him will tell you, Lieutenant Michael Davidson was a natural-born nozzleman. But he still worked and trained hard every single day to make himself even better. Many nights, Mike led his company into a fire toward the danger, using his remarkable abilities and talents to extinguish the fire. On one occasion in particular, very early in his career, with only 2 years on the job, he showed the incredible tenacity he possessed. Battling a growing third alarm fire on multiple floors, Mike pushed forward, crawling and inching room by room to knock down the fire on the third floor. The fact that he sustained serious burns to both of his hands did not deter him. He would not stop. He kept fighting. He demonstrated the unwavering dedication to duty that would make both senior members of his firehouse and his officers stand up and take notice. It was clear from the very beginning of his career that he was special. He showed it that night. He showed it every day of his 15 years of brave service. Mike commanded every situation and led his fellow firefighters into battle. He wasn't their captain, he wasn't their lieutenant, but he was without question a leader. Leadership is not simply about rank, it's about how you carry yourself, how much harder you work than everyone else, and how much effort you put into setting a strong example for others to follow. Mike trained hard. He was physically fit. He was always learning, looking to discuss recent fires or new ideas with fellow members. He took them under his wing, and he worked to make them better. Mike Davidson loved being a New York City firefighter. He loved the opportunity that gave him to help others on every tour. Perhaps it was because firefighting was in his blood. His father, Robert, served 26 years, nearly all of that time in Harlem at Engine 69 and ladder 28, and his brother Eric serves us in Engine 88 in the Bronx. Helping others is the family business for the Davidsons, and Mike knew at a young age that he wanted that career, and he entered the department at age 22. But his love of this career was not only about fighting fires, it's about the camaraderie and the family that this job offers you. In the last several days, you've all rallied around Mike's family, his wife Eileen, and their 4 beautiful children. Eileen, that support will always be there for you, now and forever. The FDNY family will stand by your side. Your children will grow up knowing their father was a true hero who gave his life fighting for others. We will never forget Mike. We will honor him, we'll remember all the good he did, and we will watch over his family always. God bless firefighter Michael Davidson. God bless the entire Davidson family, and may God continue to bless the FDNY.
A little bit of background on this, guys, if you're watching with us. We're taking this from our sister station in New York, WNYW Fox 5 in New York City. Lieutenant Michael Davidson died Friday morning from smoke inhalation in a basement fire that was in Harlem. This is where that movie was being filmed. Some of the cast members, including Edward Norton, actually visited with the family on Sunday during a wake to give their condolences to the family. He was a father of 4, married with 4 children. So this is the ongoing funeral right now, guys. We're going to stay here for a little bit, and then we'll switch it up to the Alton Sterling case that we've been talking about.
St. Patrick's Cathedral, Michael Davidson. Can you think of anyone who deserves this send-off more than Michael? Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Hessian, Michael's cousin, one of his best friends. He loved his job, he loved his friends, and above all else, he loved his family. A highly decorated New York City Fire Department veteran told me yesterday, if the New York City Fire Department had an action hero, it's Michael Davidson. He is the epitome of the strong, silent type, yet somehow you could talk to him about anything. He took care of everyone, and you always knew that you were in good hands with him. I am 2 years older than Michael, but I looked up to him. I implore you to share your personal stories about Michael, because everyone must know about him. The past 3 days, I kept saying to myself, what would Michael do? What would Michael do? Eileen, Brooke, Jojo, Emmy, and Amy, you're never alone.
Guys, let's switch it up and go over to this news conference that is happening live outside of the Louisiana courthouse, where the lawyer in the case of Alton Sterling, the Attorney General rather, held a news conference just prior to this. Right now there's some live commentary coming in outside of that courthouse. Let's listen in.
In our opinion, that is criminal. Every action, if you read this bias report that they submitted, was initiated by the officers. Every physical action. From the gun to the head to the flying tackle by Salamone. And yet no charges. But that's fine, because we know that it takes strength. And we know that the repercussions isn't getting violent, getting upset, it's getting you out of office. That's how you hold accountability. The only thing people care about is power. This was a political decision. That's all it was. So in order to respond, we will hold you politically accountable, from city council, mayor, police chief, attorney general, whoever you may be if you aren't standing up for justice. People out there are getting smarter. We know that to hold you accountable is to get rid of your job if you're not going to step up. What the attorney general said is, I don't think we could have got a prosecution if we had taken it to a grand jury. It's not about thinking. It's about standing up for justice and taking action and dealing with the results. If you lose, but lose with pride. Lose having fought for this family that's gone through all of this. Don't take the easy way out, relying on the federal government or playing brownie points with this current administration. Because the repercussion will be you will not have this job in the future. So no, if you're expecting people to be crying and upset and pissed off, it's not going to happen. We'll be very upset when it's re-election time for every single person involved in this situation. Because this wasn't justice. But we will put people in office, we will hold people in office. That appears to be the only thing that people care about.
Michael Adams and Brandon McQueer representing part of the family. We are also very disappointed in what happened. But listen, this fight is not over with. We have filed our civil suit, and justice will be served. We will prove in a court of law that the actions of these officers were outrageous. They were not necessary. They exceeded all bounds of decency. You know, there's a line in the movie A Few Good Men where Tom Cruise asked Gene Hackman in a jury scene about telling the truth. And Gene Hackman looks at him and he says, "You can't stand the truth." That's sort of how we feel today. Baton Rouge, you're going to have to hear the truth of what actually happened in this situation. There'll be no more closed door meetings from this point on. There'll be no more secret investigations. There'll be no more confidential reports. We're now in a civil lawsuit, and we're going to put it all out under the light of day. And all of America will know exactly how poor the policing was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on July 5th. And so we're going to bring this case now to action, and we're putting on notice the city of Baton Rouge, the Metro Council, our mayor, our police department, that we're going to tell the truth. We're going to find the truth out, and we're going to show that it was a culture of conduct and behavior that got us to this point. This is not just an isolated incident. This was not just a one-time bad situation. These guys had an attitude and a behavior and operated in a culture where they thought that they could be bullies, that they thought that they could take the life of this black man. And so now justice will be served in the 19th Judicial District Civil Court.
Edmund Jordan, representing Sandra Sterling. Like everyone else has said, I am extremely disappointed with this decision. The Attorney General said he had to look at the same burden of proof that the federal government had. And on one level, that's correct, but he's looking at state laws, not federal civil rights laws. And I believe that based on the state laws, we certainly had enough, at least, for aggravated assault, if not negligent homicide. Again, the Attorney General decided not to bring any of those charges. But let me step away and move away from that for 1 second, because really it's not about any of the attorneys standing up here. It's about this family. It's about the stress. And people look at this, and you can look at New York and what happened with Eric Garner and the tragic death of his daughter and fighting for justice for him. And we have a similar case right here. All these family members have gone through stress, anxiety, health issues. And for Sandra Sterling, and I'm sure you're going to hear from her in a second, and most people certainly don't know this stress has caused health issues for her as well. And I just want everybody, because when you go on Facebook and you go on Twitter and you make statements about family members and loved ones of these people, some positive, some negative, I want you to think about the families that you are affecting. And so rather than me say any more, I think it's time that you hear again from Sandra Sterling and from the children and loved ones of Alton, and let them tell you how they feel and the effect that it's had on them. Sandra, you want to go? Can we move the stairs? The mic is right there.
Okay. This is what I can say. Woman, I could tell you that my Jesus kind of because I had to struggle. But sitting in this meeting this morning, with Landry sat at the table, and he began to talk to us. And as he started talking to everybody, I had stopped and noticed a minute and said, "Excuse me, sir, what is your name?" And then he said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Landry. Right there, that was disrespect. Because I didn't even know who he was. So when he began to tell us all these lies, I had to stop the meeting again. And I said, thank you, sir, very much. But I heard that you was running for the governor. You would not get my vote. Because a man was murdered. And you lied. And then I asked him, do you remember the quote? Because I've been seeing a lot of ads from some of y'all's stations where you are showing when the DOJ came down here to Baton Rouge and he made a statement, but y'all never edited the last part of the statement. But I'm going to tell you what the last end of that statement said. It said, I couldn't sleep at night at what I saw on that video. I lost sleep at night at what I saw on that video. And for you to edit only the part that he said about the decision that was made, shame on you for that. And then for Jeff Landry to say, oh, I applaud him. Shame on him. And shame on him and his committee for making that decision that he made on Alton Sterling. And for all the people that say that Alton Sterling was a bad man and he should have been killed, shame on y'all for that. Because you know what? You all have kids too. And to put Blaine Salamone back on the street of Baton Rouge, you putting a killer back on the streets. So you watch your kids at night. That's all I have to say. And we don't cry no more. That's why you don't see no tears. We don't have nothing to cry about.
Have you prepared yourself to never be injustice?
So some commentary there from Alton Sterling's family. Guys, we're going to show you that news conference from the Attorney General of Louisiana from earlier this morning. We'll play that out for you. But I want to go back to this funeral for Lieutenant Michael Davidson in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City before we switch it up and go over to Michigan State University and look into the press conference there about their investigation into MSU after the Larry Nassar saga that rocked their university. Let's go over to that funeral.
He is everyone's Michael. Most of all, though, he belongs to Brooke, Joseph, Emily, and Amy, who will know and love and experience him every minute of every hour of every day forward. The outpouring of compassion and unity over the past 3 days is immensely incredible, but it's no surprise. Michael inspires it and will continue to do so far after today. When things happen that I can't untangle, I always turn to other people's words, and what words they are in this case. Here's just a very small sampling from conversations, texts, emails, and articles of the past 3 days. Gentle giant, humble, exceptional human, having selfless courage, a class act, the best, strong and pure, a rock, a rare man, a complete marvel, a radiant example, my favorite person, beautiful, a force, my one great love, and my daddy. His dear friend Kenny was quoted in the New York Times as saying, "He was invincible to me. I felt invincible because he was there." When our grandfather, our papa, passed some years ago, I read a poem by Maya Angelou that I truly felt could never, ever fit any individual, besides our exceptional, strong, pure, beautiful, and very rare grandfather. I just didn't realize it yet, though, but loud echoes of our papa did live on after he left. They lived on in Michael. So here's your poem, our boy. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We're not so much maddened as reduced to unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration, our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. May your sweet Queen's accent, your high Nike socks, and your exceptional rare beauty make us all invincible, better, and an echo of you.
Come on down, Chaplain.
And it was not as if they weren't trying to respond, because we had asked for a lot of documents and a lot of information. But before they responded, we received a credible tip with respect to Dean Strample, which we felt to be time sensitive. And as a result of that, we issued a search warrant for those items that I mentioned earlier and took them. And based on that, the investigation began at that point, led by Lieutenant Pinnell and also a number of detective sergeants from the state police, assisted by Chief Investigator from the Attorney General's office, Dave Dwyer. And they've worked extremely hard, and the end result of that is that we're here today having charged former Dean William Strample with a number of charges, which is my understanding he'll be arraigned on this afternoon at 2:30 in the East Lansing District Court. I would caution again at this point in time and remind everybody that these are nothing more than accusations against the former dean, that he's presumed to be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, the four charges that I would anticipate he's going to be arraigned on this afternoon are count one, misconduct in office, which is a 5-year felony. The second count is criminal sexual conduct in the 4th degree, which is a 2-year high misdemeanor, and 2 counts of willful neglect of duty, which are 1-year misdemeanors. The criminal sexual conduct case, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but the other charges of misconduct in office and the willful neglect of duty are somewhat nebulous, and I think they provided you a packet here today which includes the probable cause affidavit that was filed with the court when we sought the warrant to arrest former Dean Strample. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole document with you, and I'm not a great one to read off of notes or read anything, quite frankly, when I talk to the media or talk to the public or talk to a jury over the years. But I want to highlight paragraphs 28 and 29 of the probable cause affidavit, because I think they summarize the basis of the misconduct charge against former Dean Strample. In paragraph 28, as dean of the college, Strample used his office to harass, discriminate, demean, sexually proposition, and sexually assault female students in violation of his statutory duty as a public officer. In paragraph 29, as dean of the college, Strample abused the authority of his public office through threats and manipulation to solicit, receive, possess pornographic images of women who appear to be MSU students in violation of his statutory duty as a public officer. Counts 3 and 4 apply to his supervision, or quite frankly, his lack of supervision of Larry Nassar. Count 3 alleges that he did willfully neglect to develop and maintain Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine, a duty enjoined upon him by statute, by allowing Larry Nassar, a DO, whom the defendant had supervisory duties over, to continue to see patients after receiving a Title IX complaint alleging sexual misconduct by Nassar before the Title IX investigation was completed. Count 4 alleges that he failed to enforce protocols, including but not limited to the use of surgical gloves during examinations, procedures involving patients, requiring informed consent from patients prior to any examinations or procedures, and attendance by any other employee in the examination room with Nassar and patients during examinations of procedure. Those are the basis of the 4 charges against him. I'm not going to take any questions. I'm not going to go into any more detail because this is a pending case and I have an ethical obligation as an attorney not to comment on that. But I will say this is an ongoing investigation, and we would encourage anybody with information, whether it be about former Dean Strample or whether it's about anything at Michigan State that they're concerned about, to call the hotline from the Attorney General's office and to report that.
Can you at least discuss where the tip came from?
No.
Since there was some controversy about the raid, is it your contention that the tip you got meant that you had to get in there and get that documents before somebody else got them?
I'm not going to answer that. How's that? Not going to answer any more questions. I'm just not.
Well, did you think that was a political stunt, the raid?
Not going there. We did what we felt we needed to do, and it led us to where we are today.
What does it say about the
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Counselor.
A lawyer that's around the corner.
And
It's a lot harder.
None of these,
You can't-
none of these police are residents of Baton Rouge.
So
Neither one of them.
So it's a lot harder. And especially when you get justified to behave the way that Salamone did, and hopefully he won't have a job for much longer.
What's the status of your civil lawsuit against the city and the officers?
Well, it's moving along fine. In fact, we had a conference call about a week or so ago with the parish attorney. At this point, we told him that expect anything and everything. We're coming. I guess obviously the big question is when are we going to see this video? I think once that video is made available, and obviously now that there has been no indication of an indictment or any criminal charge that anything held in this office's possession and the Baton Rouge Police Department's possession is no longer subject to any exception for disclosure. That means everything is available. We will be looking at this information very carefully to make sure that it hasn't been edited or redacted to show a different scenario than what we've been led to believe in all of these various reports that have been provided to us. But to answer your question, yes, we're going to move this thing along quite fast, quite quickly, seeing as that we've had a federal government that investigated it for 10 months, interviewed all of the same witnesses. We had a state investigation for another 10 months that interviewed all the same witnesses. I don't see why we can't get this thing moved pretty quickly.
Well,
Yeah.
when it comes to the civil litigation,
Are you guys, you can never put a price on a life, but are you guys seeking any kind of monetary payment? Are you all handling this pro bono for the family as well?
So first and foremost, we want to make sure that the police officers are held what we call negligent under the civil standards. So yes, we are seeking justice through a civil negligence component. With that, as we all know, the only way to compensate or to bring about any closure will be through whatever the jury determines is just for Mr. Sterling's life. And at that point, we will know whether justice was delivered.
Listen. Up until this time, we've been hamstrung on moving the civil case forward because of the 2 criminal investigations. But like I said earlier, the light of day now and the gloves are off. The light of day now will be shined on this case. We now have the ability to go in, and we will quickly obtain all of those videotapes, and we're going to release them in the public. We want everybody to see exactly what happened. We want everybody to know what the truth is. And we want to then proceed with our civil case. We're going to then put witnesses under oath. We're going to put, everybody who was out there that night, Mr. Salamone and Mr. Lake, they will have to talk to us. We finally now will get the opportunity to move this civil case forward, and we're seeking justice for this family, but under our civil rules, ultimately that means a judgment, which is a money judgment. We can't do anything in the world to bring Alton Sterling back, but under the American civil justice system, the only thing we can do now is to recover a monetary award for them. And so we're putting the Metro Council on notice. We're putting the city of Baton Rouge on notice. Do the right thing. Let's bring this community back together. Let's do the right thing with this case.
You mentioned the officers' jobs. I understand the disciplinary decision by the police chief has not come down yet. It might come down sometime today or this week. What do you want to see with that? What do you want the police chief to
It matters not what his decision is. If he chooses to keep them, that's fine. There's a standard that they still have to abide by, which is the law.
They need to be fired.
They need to be fired. First and foremost, they should be fired. But what he decides in terms of discipline is between him and his officers. However, our measure of justice will come inside of that courtroom, which we intend to bring those officers there and to explain their action to our community in the form of a jury. One of the things that neither the federal government did nor the state attorney general did here was put this evidence in front of you and let you guys look at it. He independently decided, I don't think this is enough. Under our justice, under our court, you have to at least have 12 people in a box that make this decision. He independently made it. We want 12 people to look at this information and see what the result may be. I gotta believe it will be completely different. Other thing is, it's interesting enough, this video that's sitting out there that no one has seen. For everyone from the U.S. Attorney here in Baton Rouge to the FBI office in New Orleans to the State Attorney General here, for every one of them to say that that video is bad, but no one wants to give it to us. They all want to sit there and hold on to it, keep it somewhere and say, oh, I've sent it back to the federal government, or I sent it to the sources that had it. It's strange that the mayor and her office have been sitting on this video for at least 3 or 4 days, and no one has seen it. But yet we get called here today to tell them, oh, we've sent it back 3 days ago. A lot of things are strange about this case that we're going to find out real fast.
But they need to be terminated, and thank y'all.
All of them need to be terminated.
Thank you, guys.
The mayor and all of them need to get out of there.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay, I live this year.
So guys, if you've been watching along with us, that's the statement from Alton Sterling's family shortly after the Attorney General of Louisiana announced there will be no criminal charges for the Baton Rouge police officers who shot Alton Sterling in July 2016. This comes 11 months or so after the Justice Department also announced no federal criminal charges for police in this case. Let's jump back over to New York City, guys, where they're finishing up with a funeral procession for Lieutenant Michael Davidson inside St. Patrick's Cathedral. All right, guys, definitely an emotional scene there in New York City. That's St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue in New York City, right there in Manhattan. Thousands have turned out to celebrate the life of Lieutenant Michael Davidson, who died on Friday due to smoke inhalation. I want to take you over now to another live press conference, this one about Stephon Clark. We were talking about this yesterday. This is in Sacramento. We're seeing a live bump shot up right now. Just came down. This is going to be another news conference about this case. This was the 22-year-old black man who was shot 20 times in his backyard. This was on March 18th by Sacramento police. Body camera videos were released. There was a 911 call and a lot of speculation as to whether police officers muted the volume on those videos and were hiding something. The video went silent and the officers talked amongst themselves. There's still an ongoing investigation into this case. So we're going to play out this news conference now. It looks like it's coming up shortly. So this is over in Sacramento, guys, live. Look inside that news conference room.
Let me just zoom in real quick and tell me what okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I recognize it.
No, I'm well, I was both. You're looking at what's the senior should be correct. No, no, it's not. Yeah, we're going to get the cutaways. Yeah, you bet. He does?
It does look like a knife, right? It does look like or something.
Everybody ready? I want to say good morning and thank each and every one of you for being here today. I want to especially extend a welcome and a note of gratitude to all the community leaders who are here with us as well. As you can see, for Sacramento, this is an important occasion to talk about some important things, and so we thank everyone who is here with us today. Let me give you a quick run of show so you have a sense of how we're going to conduct this press conference. I'm going to actually turn this over in a moment to Chief Hahn with the Sacramento Police Department, and then he'll turn it back over to me, and then we'll have the following individuals who will speak as well. We have the Mayor of the City of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg. We have the District Attorney for the County of Sacramento, Emery Schubert. We have Pastor Anthony Sadler, Pastor Bob Ballion, Dr. Ollie Mack, and Mr. Mark Havener, who will speak. I hope you will give each and every speaker your attention, and afterwards we'll take questions. Today is all about building and strengthening respect and trust between our communities and the men and women of law enforcement who are there to protect us. I believe that's what's essential to have and to achieve true and lasting public safety for our neighbors and for our peace officers. With that in mind, it's appropriate to ask, as I said earlier, Chief Daniel Hahn of the Sacramento Police Department to lead us in announcing today's decision. So at this stage, let me turn the microphone over to Chief Daniel Hahn.
Good morning. I'd first like to thank Attorney General Becerra. I appreciate your willingness to help our city and our community during this critical time and on this significant issue. On February 18th, our city experienced a tragedy that no one wants to see or experience. March. As our city's police chief, who has lived in this community my entire life, I'm dedicated to making sure that we gather all the facts, conduct a thorough investigation, and promise we will continue to be transparent throughout the process. Our community deserves nothing less. I also promise, regardless of the final outcome of this investigation, we will explore and implement ways to better serve our community and find ways to prevent this sort of tragedy in our city. That is my promise as this city's police chief and a lifelong member. It is the same process that we announced. It is in this same process that we announced the addition of the State Department of Justice being part of this investigation. I have complete confidence in the detectives in my department to accurately and impartially and thoroughly investigate this tragic incident. But due to the nature of this investigation, the extremely high emotions, anger, and hurt in our city, I felt it was the best interest of our entire community, including the members of our police department, to ask the Attorney General to be an independent part of this investigation. And Mr. Becerra agreed to be that independent body. Our city is at a critical point right now, and I believe this will help build faith and confidence in the investigation from our community. The Sacramento Police Department will provide full access and involvement for the Department of Justice investigators during the entire investigation. They will also provide an independent review of our policies and our training as it relates to use of force. I again would like to thank our Attorney General for his dedication to the Sacramento community through his willingness to be an independent part of this investigation. I'd also like to speak to the recent events in our city. Protest has a rich and positive place in our nation's history and definitely in our state and our city's history. As the capital of California, we often see the rights of protesters exercised in our city. But as we have seen, I am concerned that as a community, we exercise calm over the coming weeks and months, and that we don't have any more tragedies, injuries, or property damage, as that does not help us move forward and improve the city for all people. It is with this in mind, I want to thank the leaders in our community that are here with us today, supporting our city and being safe, the fraternities, the sororities, and the pastors that are here today. I thank all of them for being engaged in ensuring that everyone in our city is safe and has the opportunity to thrive. Lastly, I want to ensure our community that the police department will continue to be transparent and continue to openly share information that we can regarding this investigation. We released body-worn camera and helicopter video in unprecedented fashion within 3 days because that was the right thing to do for our community. We provided updates on some of the evidence in the case as we obtained it, and we will continue to do so. We want to be a leader not only in our state, but our nation in regard to what partnerships with our community look like and what transparency looks like, because that is what's best for our Sacramento community. I would also like to thank the men and women of the Sacramento Police Department who have been working many long hours over the last week. They have shown tremendous professionalism, patience, and dedication to our city. They have truly provided a tremendous service to our city during this very trying time. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the Attorney General.
I thank and respect Chief Daniel Hahn, and quite honestly, I thank and respect everyone in the community who made this call possible for us to come together this way. The California Department of Justice will now step in and provide independent oversight of this investigation into the shooting of Stephon Clark. My team and I at the California Department of Justice will do everything in our power to ensure that this investigation is fair, thorough, and impartial. I also want to thank and respect Chief Hahn for agreeing that the California Department of Justice's involvement in this matter will extend to include a review of the policing policies, procedures, and practices at the Sacramento Police Department. Although we will continue to coordinate with the Sacramento Police Department, we will retain our independence as we conduct this review. Our independent oversight of the investigation and our separate review of the department will be based on the facts and the law. Nothing more, nothing less. At this time, it's hard to say much more than that about either assignment because one involves an ongoing investigation and the other has yet to commence. But I can tell you this, we take our responsibility in full recognition of the importance of getting it right. Because it's about respect and trust. It's about identifying ways to achieve public safety and safer outcomes in the future. The California Department of Justice is here to live up to its name. We work with law enforcement and communities across California every day. And we work to uphold justice every day. Today, we take another important step towards strengthening the respect and trust that we need to keep Californians safe. With that, let me now turn the microphone over to our mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinke.
Good morning, everyone. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues for being here, fraternity members, the pastors. I want to acknowledge all those in the community who have kept the peace on the community side and the men and women of Sacramento's police department who have helped keep the peace in very real ways over the past week. I want to, of course, thank Chief Hahn for his consistent, outstanding, and steady leadership. Thank you to Anne Marie Schubert, our district attorney, who you're going to hear from in a moment, for not making this about turf when so much is at stake. A big thank you to our Attorney General Javier Becerra for stepping up big time and providing our community and all communities in California that extra assurance that the Stephon Clark investigation will be fair and impartial. You did not have to say yes. You did so. That is leadership. I'm also appreciative of the fact that the Attorney General is going to help us review our policies, protocols, and training around de-escalating conflict and the many questions that arise from the public's view of the Stephon Clark video. We appreciate this help, and at the same time, the city, working with our police chief and our police department, is on a parallel track going to begin our own aggressive look at the same policies, protocols, and training practices. As mayor of the proud city of Sacramento, I recognize that we have difficult days ahead as we grieve and confront the death of Stephon Clark. But for all that is within our control, these days, these weeks, and these months can also become the moment when our city and our country asked and answered the most important question: isn't there a better way? That question resounds not only in the interactions between law enforcement and our communities, but in every aspect of civic life, how we treat one another and how we go about creating genuine opportunity for all people in Sacramento.
How we answer this question together around Stephon Clark's death will determine whether we divide and despair or whether we heal and hail justice and change. Today's announcement makes me even more confident that we will in fact achieve the latter. Like the chief, I call for peace and nonviolence everywhere, every day in our community. Violence must not beget violence. The country is watching us. Let us show how a city in pain, together with all of our partners, in fact, achieved a better way. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce our District Attorney, Anne Marie Hsu.
Good morning, everybody. I want to echo what Chief Hahn and Mayor Steinberg said, is that I think there's no question that this is a tragedy in our community. I, too, was raised in this community. And any loss of life due to violence affects all of us. As a career prosecutor, I've sat with families that have lost loved ones, and their lives are forever impacted. And they'll never see the light of day the way they did before this. I also understand there's tremendous anger, there's tremendous grief, and there's also many that are distrustful of our system. And I also understand that any time a tragedy like this occurs, the public demands answers, and oftentimes they want those answers quickly. My job as your district attorney is to conduct a full, fair, and independent review of this shooting. At the end of the day, it's to follow the facts and the law. That is an oath that I took 28 years ago, to follow our ethics, to comply with our professional responsibilities, and to do our job. Understand that that process will take time. It will take time for law enforcement to complete their full, fair investigation. The review by our office will take time as well. A thorough, fair, and independent review demands that we do it right. I welcome the Attorney General's office providing independence, assistance, another layer of review. I have great respect for the Attorney General Becerra. I know that he and I agree that what needs to occur is not simply that we follow the facts and the law, but that the community has faith that wherever that leads us, that we've done the right job. So I welcome the Attorney General's office in this assistance, and I hope and pray that the community understands what our roles are, and that at the end of the day, we will do justice as the Attorney General said. Thank you. And at this time, I'll introduce Pastor Sadler.
Thank you, DA. Let me begin my comments by first saying to the family of Stephon Clark, I can only imagine the hurt and the pain you must be feeling at this time. I have a son just a little older than Stephon was. Please know that our thoughts and our prayers and our concern is with you because we are one city. I understand the community is concerned about the integrity of the investigation, but I would remind you that we are not some of the other major cities in the country that have had challenges. We are all one here in Sacramento. We are one of the most diverse cities in the nation, and we have an advantage of relationships that have already begun before this tragedy hit that we have to rely on now at a time where we're asking for peace and trust. I believe that the addition of the AG's office to oversee this investigation is a wonderful step forward and a wonderful act of faith on our Chief Daniel Hahn's part to say he is being transparent, he is committed to being transparent, and an attempt to satisfy all the concerns of all our many wonderful constituents and citizens and community members here in Sacramento. I want to add my voice to those that have gone on before. We are calling for peace. We are calling for calm. We know that feelings and emotions are high, but we need to do this again as one city. This is Sacramento. We have an opportunity with the national spotlight not only to heal ourselves through the act of God, but to show a nation how a city can pull together in tragedy and bring something good out of it. My honor to introduce Pastor Bob Valiant at this time.
Thank you, Pastor Sadler. I'm here more as a citizen of Sacramento than I am as a pastor. As Pastor Sadler said, I think everyone who has a heart is pained by what happened. We're talking this morning, we all, as clergy and as community members, want to help support the family and bring about healing for them and provide everything they need. I want to also say that personally, I am for reform where reform is needed, whether that be in law or in training. We want that to happen. And having said all that, in Christian terms, Chief Hahn has been, he's the chosen one. We all wanted Chief Hahn in this position. Chief Hahn is the Messiah. And we need to give Chief Hahn, we need to give the Attorney General, we need to give the Mayor, and now we need to give the Justice Department every opportunity to go through this investigation. I firmly believe my co-pastor Ephraim Smith and I are telling all of our congregation to pray for peace and to pray for calm. Sacramento, I would love to be a model city for the rest of the nation, as Pastor Sadler said. And so I'm praying that all of you are praying that all of our people feel the same way. Protests can happen, but it can happen in a way where the city remains standing. Thank you.
Amen to that. Dr. Ollie Mack.
Dr. Ollie Mack.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Ollie Mack. I'm here to help represent the fraternities and sororities in Sacramento County. And I've been a resident of Sacramento for 30 years. I've been a resident of the United States of America for 68 years. So in that 68 years, I understand your concern. I understand your anger. I understand the frustration. But I know part of that frustration and anger has come from the fact that we don't believe our voices are being heard. We don't believe that we've got the ears of the right people to begin to make changes. But I think this time is different. I think this time Sacramento will be a role model for how these type of incidents should be investigated and responded to. I think that under these circumstances, your voices have been heard. We have the California Attorney General willing to become involved. We have the Sacramento District Attorney willing to become involved. And you know your voice has been heard when you have the National Basketball Association stepping up and doing public service announcements to bring this issue to the light of the country. So I say to you, we're doing our work, we're doing our job. What we don't want to do is distract from that message, to dilute that message. And just as your actions have been positive in getting people to hear the message, negative actions will dilute that message. I can guarantee you that if you have people jumping on cars, spitting on people, that will be the news, and not the fact that we're moving forward towards seeking justice. So I say to you, if you want to honor the life of Stephon Clark, if you want to stand up and honor the wishes of the family, that we break this cycle of police interactions with men of color, then I say to you, stand up And don't let this message, which is so important to be gotten out, to be diluted by individuals who come in with a whole nother message. When you see those types of actions, no, they're taking away your voice. They're distracting away from the message we want people to hear. So I say to you, stand up and honor the life of Stephon Clark. Stand up and honor the wishes of the family that we break this cycle. Stand up and do what we need to do, because if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Havener.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Havener. I've been a citizen of Sacramento for over 20 years. I came to represent the community. A lot of what I was going to say, Dr. Mack already said, unfortunately.
Say it again.
I think we're at a turning point in Sacramento, and right now a lot of us are angry. You have every right to be angry. The way to voice that anger is through peaceful protest and through the vote. Like Dr. Mack said, if you let violence and vandalism enter into the picture, then you let other people send their message instead of you sending your message. So don't let others rewrite your message. Please give prayers to the Stephon's family and for our police department. I thank the Attorney General, the Mayor, and our Chief of Police for allowing community members to even speak to the press today. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to the Attorney General.
Mark, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Chief Hahn to join me. We're going to try to take a few questions. I hope you'll recognize that, again, this is an ongoing investigation, and so our responses are going to be very directed so we can make sure that we give you as much information as we can, but limited as it might be, we'll try to give you our best responses. Any questions?
Attorney General, yes. Sir, can you comment about how often or how experienced your office is in investigating officer-involved shootings specifically, and also the timeline? We know it's going to take a long time, but how long before recommendations and conclusions can be drawn?
So the California Department of Justice has a history of investigating. We do any number of investigations, including on the law enforcement side and in criminal matters as well. What we intend to do, working with the city of Sacramento and with Chief Hahn and the police department, is make sure that we can provide oversight, some independent eyes to the investigation that's underway. We're not taking over the investigation, but we are providing independent oversight of the investigation with some members of our team who have experience doing this. We will, as I said as well, be in the process of sitting down with police department leaders, city leaders, and I hope we get the involvement of the members of the community in trying to talk about moving forward the policing practices, procedures, and policies that are employed here in Sacramento, which we hope, if we do it right, and I think everyone you've heard speak is hoping so, that we'll become a model here in Sacramento for other jurisdictions as well.
Timeline?
That would be hard to give you any impression on that, since the investigation is right now underway.
Sir, how does this... Other states have, if there's a police-involved shooting, a different department would take over. Why does California not allow that, to have a state-run police department take over an investigation for a police department that has a police-involved shooting?
I'm sorry, why is it state policy?
All the state policies. The Sacramento PD is taking over this investigation. That's two of their officers. Why would another agency not step forward, and another police agency not step forward before today that you all did?
We have a pretty established practice in California of how we do investigations of these kinds. Also, under our laws and our Constitution, the California Department of Justice has the authority to undertake investigations. We don't have the type of resources that would allow us to undertake investigations in 58 different counties every time an incident occurs, whether it's a police officer involved shooting or some other type of incident. But we have independent authority to go in to try to either investigate or, in this case, work with the local authorities to try to provide independent eyes, as we've said before. And so it's really up to the legislature, and it's up to the people of the state as to how we form our Constitution, as to how these types of matters are investigated. But right now what we're doing is trying to provide as best a process that will give people the confidence to know that this investigation was done properly.
Who will have final say as to whether or not, say, charges are brought against the officers, whatever the resolution happens to be? Is it still in the hands of the DA?
We've not, and I'll let District Attorney Schubert as well answer if she'd like, but we're not intending to undermine local authority here. We're trying to provide an independent investigative arm to this investigation that occurs. I have independent authority as well to consider prosecution, and so we are hoping that the way this works out is that we have a process that will be, as I think Chief Hahn said, transparent, and will allow people to see how we take every step, including should there be any action after the investigation, including any potential prosecution. And so at this stage, the District Attorney Schubert, retains the authority to move forward. We're not changing any of that. And I continue to retain my independent authority to consider something beyond an investigative process and also prosecution.
Attorney General, as you have looked at the tape yourself, what are the questions that you personally have after watching?
You know what? I have feelings the way everyone else does. I have my own particular views. But right now, I'm speaking to you as the Attorney General for 40 million people. And more specifically for every person in the city of California that's hoping that we end up with a process that's fair, impartial, and thorough. And so right now, quite honestly, what's important is not how I feel or what I see. It's what the independent evidence will show. And that's the basis for us taking any action. Let me make sure if the District Attorney Schubert wanted to respond to anything on the previous question.
I would just agree with the Attorney General. There's nothing about the DA's office abdicating their role and what our responsibilities are. As I said earlier, we're going to follow the facts of the law. We're going to do our job. But as I said also, I welcome the independent review by the Attorney General. So that's how the process is going to work.
As a little background, District Attorney, you did not file charges in the Joseph Mann shooting, which I think to many people seemed cut and dried. How is this different, and why? And if you can specifically explain publicly why you made that decision.
Let's do this. There's going to be lots of time for a lot of other questions. I want to make sure that while I've got the Chief here and I'm here, if you want to ask questions specifically about what we're doing today, we'll answer them. I'm sure that the District Attorney and others will be available to answer questions that go beyond what the purpose of this press conference is about.
Question for Chief Hahn.
Okay.
Chief Hahn, as noted, the investigation, the policy review, it's going to take time. Have you given any guidance to your officers to make sure the same thing doesn't happen on some dark street tonight?
Well, we always give, it's continual guidance of doing what is right at all times. So every situation is different, so that's a continual message to our officers, is to do what's right for our city.
But is pursuing someone who perhaps who broke the windows with guns drawn, is that appropriate?
Well, that's what the investigation will determine. But again, every situation an officer goes to is different, so there will never be one exactly that same way again. So that specific case will be part of this investigation.
I'd like to add something here. The Chief, everybody's right. It would be unfair to prejudge the investigation, but there is a different way to answer your question, and we intend to do so. The Attorney General, the second part of the announcement is equally important, which is that the Attorney General over the weeks and months ahead is going to look at training protocols, the very kind of question that you asked, but so is the mayor and the city council together with the police chief. April the 10th, we are going to convene in our regular council meeting in public session to begin asking and answering a series of 10 or 11 questions that the community is asking, arising out of watching the video. And so we're not going to wait until the end of the investigation to ask the policy, protocol, and training questions that everyone is asking. I think we can do that, and we can do it thoroughly without prejudging anything about this particular investigation.
Algo en español.
Sí, por favor, ¿qué significa esto? Que ahora el Departamento de Justicia va a hacer una investigación independiente.
And I'll say just a few remarks in Spanish because I can always say them afterwards as well. Este es un día importante porque lo que anunciamos hoy fue el resultado del jefe de la policía, Daniel Hahn, invitando al Departamento de Justicia a entrar a esta investigación y revisar las prácticas del Departamento de Policía. Algo importante porque todos nosotros.
So again, guys, you're watching this live news conference here with the California Attorney General who's speaking now, as well as the District Attorney, the Mayor of Sacramento, and the Police Chief of Sacramento, talk about this Stephon Clark case that we've been talking about for a couple of days now. In fact, on our stream yesterday, we had another update from this same case, but it looks like really they're all banding together here to bring all the facts to light and keep this issue sort of spurred on, kind of continuing as they fight to see what will become of this. Of course, seeking justice for his family and whatnot. So this is quite a big one. I know this is a longer live news conference, but we did want to take it all to our stream. So let's check back in here. It should be finishing up in just a little bit.
Other questions? Attorney General, should there be a permanent statewide protocol for outside investigations of police shootings like other states have?
Look, let's focus on today. Let's focus on what we're doing here. What's important is that I think what we're coming together to announce is not only that we hope we do a thorough job of presenting a transparent set of facts on what happened in this incident, but a greater goal has to be that we're preventing, incidents like this in the future. And we have to dig deep to find out what that takes, because as I think Chief Hahn said, every circumstance is very different. And we owe it to everyone, whether it's the community, whether it's the officers who have to patrol these communities. We have to make sure that we're giving people a clear sense that public safety is what drives everything we do. And so going into what happens from this, let's do this right. If we do this right, that'll answer a lot of questions about where we go in the future.
Yeah. Attorney General, specifically, you've spoken many times about transparency, but you haven't articulated exactly how the oversight of the DOJ increases the transparency of the investigation, and whether you have the ability to veto, to provide a minority report, to produce additional information into how that investigation is being conducted. And while you're addressing that, can you also say how many people you're assigning to that task force for that oversight?
The best thing I can tell you is we're going to put together a team that will have independent auditory review that will not be dependent on the Sacramento Police Department to conduct its affairs, that will be able to independently make assessments. We will not be doing the day-to-day ground activity of collecting the evidence, the forensics, but we'll be overseeing that. And I believe that what we're doing is providing the type of confidence that will let people know that the process was followed properly. I think what people want to know is that we really turned over every stone, and we're going to make sure every stone is turned.
So you're going to provide an independent report that essentially audits the process?
You're going ahead of me on this one. I think you just heard that the Chief of Police of the Department of Police here in Sacramento invited the Department of Justice to come in. That's pretty big. And I believe that he's showing trust and respect. I'm going to show him the same respect, and trust as well. So I'm not going to prejudge what I have to do to make sure an independent review is accomplished. I believe that if we're all working with respect and trust, we can get this done together.
Attorney General, Ayande Tell ABC 10. It's my understanding that the names of the police officers involved should be released within 7 days of the incident, or on day 9. Will those names be released today?
Let me leave that question to Chief Hahn.
The names have already been out there. We have not confirmed those names because we are concerned about the officers' safety because they have received numerous death threats. So we will continue to assess that as we go along, and if we don't feel like it endangers their lives, we will confirm those names.
Señor Nassar, lo han dicho en inglés pero en español. ¿Cuál es el mensaje para la comunidad y los manifestantes? Alguno de esos ejemplos es calma, paciencia, cosas por el estilo, ¿no?
Estamos pidiendo que la comunidad nos dé la oportunidad de conducir esta investigación, que si quieren manifestar, es el derecho de todos aquí en este país de expresarse, pero que se expresen en una manera cívica, que no viola la ley, porque es importante dejar que la comunidad sepa que vamos a perseguir la justicia en este caso.
Gracias. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Attorney General, you mentioned that you were invited into this investigation. How common is that? Have you ever had another police chief reach out to you and ask you to participate?
Well, as I think you heard, you've got a different police chief here in Sacramento. I have in my slightly more than a year had local authorities ask the Department of Justice to come in. We are right now, for example, in San Francisco overseeing the implementation of 272 reforms by the San Francisco Police Department, and it is my department that is overseeing independently that reform process. We were invited in by the city of Sacramento by then. Mayor Ed Lee, who, may he rest in peace, passed suddenly and was followed through by the city leadership in San Francisco. Sometimes we go in without being invited, but it helps when you're invited because that means there's a partnership that can be formed and you can do this together. Look, I hope that this becomes something that we see more often, that local authorities feel comfortable having independent, it doesn't have to be the Department of Justice, but independent oversight because they feel confident that transparency will prove that they are conducting themselves well. And so in this particular case, Daniel Hahn, who is someone that I've respected for quite some time, gave me an opportunity to do something. And I think it's important that the men and women of the Department of Justice be part of this with Chief Hahn.
Chief, how is this different from the Office of Accountability, Public Safety and Accountability in their review? Is there a different level of investigation or a different level of how this is going to be different from what already exists in the city?
Yeah, I don't think these conflict with each other. I think that's another independent look at it, but these folks are part of the investigation and will be side by side with the investigators and provide that independent review as law enforcement investigators. So I think they complement each other nicely.
Chief, we've seen the impact that this has had on the community. What has the impact of this been inside your department?
Well, as I've said previously, this is a tragedy first and foremost for the family, but also for our entire community and also for the police department. The last week or so has been really trying times for our whole community, including the police officers that have to go out on the street every day and work in the protests and just handling calls. And so when I said this is good for our community, I also said it's good for our police officers because the more our community trusts and has faith in the police department, that makes it that much better for the officers to work there also.
Chief, told you I like this guy. Can you speak to the backgrounds of the officers involved? As you said, yes, please, Chief. You had concerns about safety issues, but still questions about whether or not either of them have ever been involved in an officer-involved shooting before, things like that. When can we find out that information?
And this will have to be the last question.
Yeah, we will start releasing things that we can, but right now we don't want to speak too much about the officers because, again, they've received death threats, and so we have to evaluate all those threats and determine how valid they are and then move forward. But as time goes on, all that will come out. I think hopefully our community has seen that we are extremely transparent. We have put out video and put out information as we get it. That's not typical, so we will continue to do that.
Thank you all very much, especially to our community leaders.
Obviously, you guys, quite an intense time there. Everybody taking the stand there for that very important news conference on this Stephon Clark case that we've been chatting about and listening to for the past day or so. As that sort of unfolds and we get more answers for that, we'll bring you more of that here, as our priority, of course, is breaking news and live stuff coming in. Nothing really new to show you right now. I'm looking at all of our video routers coming in. So let's show you some of the top stories of today, this Tuesday, March 27th. Here's some of our top stories. Take a listen.
Named Gypsy, who somehow found himself at the very top of an SRP power pole near 37th Avenue and Bethany home in Glendale, about 30 feet up, with no easy way to get down.
He could have jumped, and knowing him, he probably would have, but thank goodness he didn't, because that was, just kind of high for a cat.
The saga playing out live on social media with thousands of viewers tuning in to see how the kitten would get back on solid ground.
But it is pretty amazing that this tiny little thing is famous.
His owners, Ash and Jenny, watching nervously as people try to formulate a plan. Ash called out of work with an excuse her boss had likely never heard before.
I kind of proved it by sending them the news link for Facebook, and then I was like, yeah, so there's my cat up there.
Finally, a neighbor came to the rescue. He used a ladder propped against the pole and very carefully plucked Gypsy from his perilous perch. With his ordeal now over, Gypsy had had enough of the cameras pointing his way.
He's not want to be famous.
The dreaded tax day is approaching fast, this year on April 17th because of how the calendar falls. And according to tax expert Andrew Poulos, you can get creative to save even more of your hard-earned cash.
100 here, a few hundred there, eventually start making a difference on people's tax returns.
One thing to think about, animals. Furry friends typically don't count toward a tax deduction, but think again if your pet helps a medical condition or was purchased for a business reason.
They would be allowed to deduct the cost of their pets, the food cost, purchasing, for example, some dogs to protect the business, the vet bills, that sort of stuff would be tax deductible for a small business owner.
Another trick, student loans. Poulos says you can still take a deduction on your loans even if someone else is paying them, as long as they're in your name.
It's what I call the gift that keeps on giving, right? Your parents are helping you, they're making the payments for you, and you actually get the tax benefit on your tax return.
Still wanting to get some extra cash from Uncle Sam? Look to your closet. Donated clothes are considered charitable contributions, including wedding dresses.
You can't write off the cost of what it cost you to get the dress for your wedding night, but you can write off the fair market value of it. That tax break could be anywhere from a couple hundred to several $1,000s.
This year could be your last to take advantage of many of these tax deductions. Under President Trump's tax plan, the standard deduction will double for many Americans, meaning you may have to donate much more to see an added benefit. Caroline Shively, Fox News.
An arrest is made in connection with the Larry Nassar Michigan State University probe. Nassar is the disgraced former sports doctor at MSU. He's now serving decades in jail for molesting young girls. Nassar admitted in court to the sexual abuse under the guise of medical treatment. Many of his victims testified they tried to sound alarms about his behavior, but those warnings fell on deaf ears.
How can this university say they had no knowledge of Nassar's conduct when it was reported for 20 years?
Authorities launched an investigation into MSU, leading to Monday night's arrest of William Strampel. Officials could be seen going in and out of the 70-year-old's home, carrying a computer and unmarked brown bags.
MSU continually denies the past, is on the road to denying the present, and in doing so is denying me and others of our future and our ability to heal.
Strampel was the dean of osteopathic medicine at MSU, overseeing Nassar and others. In 2014, Strampel reportedly ordered a third person be present during some of Nassar's treatments, but he never followed up. In 2016, Strampel allegedly expressed doubt about Nassar's accusers. He stepped down in December, citing medical reasons, while remaining on as a professor. Earlier this year, MSU's interim dean announced plans to revoke William Strampel's tenure. In New York, Leah Gabriel, Fox News.
What's the problem?
There's a school shooting. Please.
Where?
Here at Great Mills High School.
Nearly 20 minutes of 911 calls and a comprehensive timeline released by the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office paints a picture of fear and pain inside Great Mills High School on March 20th.
This is Desmond Barnes.
Desmond?
Yes, sir.
I need you to stay calm. We have help coming to you, okay?
Yes, sir.
Where is your injury?
In the back of my thigh.
From inside a classroom, a teacher dials for help. Desmond Barnes, one of 2 students shot by a gunman, is hiding after just being shot in the leg.
The back of your thigh? Which side, right or left?
Right. Oh, my knee hurts so bad.
We're getting help to you, Desmond, okay? You need to stay strong, everybody.
Yes, sir.
According to investigators, 17-year-old Great Mills student Austin Rollins parks in the school lot at 7:50 in the morning. 7 minutes later, he enters the building and confronts 16-year-old Jalen Willie, his reported ex-girlfriend. Rollins fires 1 shot, striking Willie in the head. As the bullet exits her body, it strikes 14-year-old student Desmond Barnes in the leg.
Hi, yes, this is Addie from Great Mills High School. There was a shot in the hallway. I don't know if it was a gun, but there's a girl outside my door bleeding on the ground.
Rollins leaves the scene and continues walking through the school.
At this time, all students in the classroom, all students will be out of the hallway in the classrooms at this time.
At 8 in the morning, 3 minutes after the shooting, school resource officer Blaine Gaskell confronts the student gunman. Rollins shoots himself in the head, and simultaneously, Gaskell fires his service weapon, striking the gun in Rollins' hand.
After the tragic loss of 2 lead singers, alt-rock band Stone Temple Pilots moves forward with a new frontman and album.
To offer a new record, I think it's a great time, a time of healing, a time of celebrating, and a time to go out on the road and perform our songs again.
The band's self-titled album introduces Michigan native Jeff Gutt as lead vocalist. You may remember him from the 2nd season of The X Factor on Fox. Jeff replaces Chester Bennington, who committed suicide last July. Bennington was tapped to replace Scott Weiland, who died of a drug overdose in 2015.
I'm here out of respect for these guys first, and then for Scott, and then for Chester, and then for myself, you know, so I'm really, that's the order for me, you know, and it'll always be that way, and no matter what this record does, and no matter how good this tour goes, and it'll always be that way for me. So, and that's how it was the first day I walked in the room, and that's how it'll be the day we get off tour.
It's just a matter of moving forward as part of STP. I mean, we obviously knew the talent that Jeff has, but you know, I think it was applying, and this goes for the 4 of us, I think, is applying everything we know and everything he knows together and making a path forward.
Stone Temple Pilots wants you.
Surviving members Robert, Dean, and Eric set out to find a new lead. 15,000 hopefuls later, they stumbled on their guide.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I do, and that's why it's more exciting for me, you know.
You're so very special.
Gutt says his experience with other bands and his time on The X Factor helped lead to this moment.
Everything in my life and all the things that where it didn't work, I feel like were for a reason, so I could be in this position, and I've learned everything I've learned along the way up to this point, so that I could be everything I need to be for this exact moment in my life.
STP is currently on the road with dates through May. In Hollywood, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
Something truly special.
Certain to dominate the DVD galaxy, the much-anticipated release of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, tops this week's new and entertainment list.
I've seen this raw strength only once before.
The blockbuster franchise's second highest-grossing film follows Resistance fighter Rey as she trains with Luke Skywalker to defeat Kylo Ren and the First Order.
I'm gonna do everything I can to try and find her.
Also out on DVD, Bruce Willis plays a police detective fighting human traffickers in acts of violence. Burt Reynolds returns to the big screen in The Last Movie Star, the gritty Syrian Civil War documentary Last Men in Aleppo, and a 25th anniversary collector's edition of The Sandlot.
You have to be willing to do anything to protect yourself.
New TV titles include The Americans, the complete 5th season, Legion, the complete season 1, Mr. Robot season 3.0, Archer Dreamland, the complete season 8, and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, It's a Beautiful Day collection. In music, Kate Nash drops Drink About You, Casey Musgrave is out with Space Cowboy, En Vogue releases Rocket, and Ben Harper and Charlie Musselwhite bring No Mercy in This Land.
I don't care how you stop them.
And for video gamers, PS4 and Xbox One consoles feature Far Cry 5, while PS4 steps up to the plate with MLB The Show 18. In Hollywood, Anita Vogel, Fox News.
Christina Aguilera lighting up social media after ditching the smoky eyes and bold lipstick. The 37-year-old singer is virtually makeup-free on the latest cover of Paper magazine. She says it was liberating, but admits she likes wearing makeup, so don't expect that trademark glam look to go away. Actor Ben Platt lands a new role on the big screen. The young singer, fresh off of a performance at the March for Our Lives rally in Washington, has been cast alongside Damian Lewis in Run This Town. That's on top of another movie, a Netflix series, and his debut album. He won a Tony last year for his role in Broadway's Dear Evan Hansen. Steven Spielberg throws shade at Netflix. In an interview with ITV, he says he doesn't think the company deserves any Oscar awards. He says if it debuts on the small screen, then it should be considered a made-for-TV movie, eligible for the Emmys.
Netflix, by the way, expects to release 80 new films in 2018. That's 30 more than last year. In Atlanta, Emily Ketta, Fox News.
Another legal layer to the presidential saga of Stormy Daniels. The adult film star is now suing President Trump's attorney for defamation. Monday's legal action revises her current lawsuit against the commander-in-chief to include lawyer Michael Cohen. Daniels essentially says Cohen harmed her reputation last month when he accused her of lying about the alleged 2006 affair. Daniels' suit does not give specifics, only claiming she, quote, has suffered damages and an amount to be proven at trial. The 39-year-old is fresh off her 60 Minutes interview, where she revealed details of her reported tryst with the now president and the fallout. Daniels claims she was threatened by an unidentified man.
A guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, a beautiful little girl, it'd be a shame if something happened to her mom. And then he was gone.
The White House is pushing back against Daniels, saying there's simply no evidence.
The president doesn't believe that any of the claims that Ms. Daniels made last night in the interview are accurate.
He doesn't believe she was threatened.
No, he does not.
Daniels is also trying to strike down the initial confidentiality agreement. Her team claims the NDA is invalid because the $130,000 payment she received for her silence involved a presidential candidate, a violation of campaign contribution laws. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
All right, guys, so that was just a taste of some of the top stories from today, Tuesday, March 27th. Just kind of a variety of stuff from entertainment to news to, of course, the Stormy Daniels scandal. And then also the inside look at those 911 calls from Great Mills High School. We were covering that shooting. That was a whole day of breaking news on that Tuesday, just about a week ago today. It was. And now some new information coming out about how the alleged shooter did shoot himself, was not engaged by the resource officer as was first reported in some of the news outlets. So now we know some of the details there, but that's some of the top stories. I want to jump back though to, we're keeping an eye on some of our video today to see if we have anything breaking for you, but jumping back to that Alton Sterling case, we've been talking about this throughout the morning as well. We never got to play out the Louisiana Attorney General's words, his remarks today on that news conference, the update on that case. And I have a clip now of him speaking, and this is when it was announced that there will be no criminal charges, state criminal charges, for the shooter in this case. Again, quickly, July 5th, 2016 is when Alton Sterling, he's a 37-year-old black man, was shot at close range by 2 Baton Rouge Police Department officers. And here is this morning's announcement from the Attorney General about the conclusion in this case. In this case, no criminal charges. And just 11 months ago, they also announced no federal criminal charges as well. So here's the Attorney General this morning.
Alton Sterling. Before I get started, I want to let each of you know that after my remarks, we will distribute a copy of a detailed report containing our findings and conclusions to each of you. I encourage you to take your time and thoroughly review the report you will be provided. Moments before this press conference, I met with the family of Alton Sterling to discuss the state's investigation and our findings and conclusion. I would again like to extend my deepest sympathies to the family. Regardless of the circumstances, they have suffered pain, the pain of losing a loved one to violence. As we all know, there is a tremendous amount of pain and suffering caused by the premature loss of a loved one. And I ask that everyone keep the family in their prayers and that God continue to watch over them as they go on. As many of you know, in the days following the shooting of Mr. Sterling, some elected officials and local citizens called for the United States Department of Justice to take the leading role in this investigation. Once that decision was made, our office immediately reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office to discuss what input and privilege we would have to the investigative materials during the pendency of the federal investigation. The response that we received was that we would have no portion of the federal investigation be made available to our office until the federal investigation was concluded and the decision was rendered. This effectively sidelined our office. On May 3rd, 2017, the acting United States Attorney for the Middle District of Louisiana delivered his decision not to prosecute anyone for the death of Alton Sterling. Within 24 hours of that announcement, our office sent a team of investigators to the FBI office in New Orleans in an effort to obtain the investigative materials gathered and utilized by them in their decision-making process. Given the protocols for the transfer of evidence from the FBI to the state, our office was able to obtain the investigative materials from the FBI on May 31st, 2017, and from the United States Attorney's Office on June 1st. While that was day 331 for the family and the community, it was day 1 for our office. From day 1, we began the process of inventorying, sorting, reviewing, and analyzing the materials received. The following is what we found. Accordingly, in the early morning hours of July 5th, 2016, the Baton Rouge Police Department received a 911 call from a person who alleged to have been assaulted by a man with a firearm selling CDs in the front of the Triple S Food Mart. A review of the video evidence and information provided by the U.S. Department of Justice found that at approximately 0016 hours, Alton Sterling was seen in the front of the Triple S Food Mart, apparently selling CDs. He clearly matched the description given by the 911 caller. About this time, he is seen confronting someone with what is later determined to be a firearm that had been concealed in his right front pocket. Approximately 25 minutes later, Baton Rouge City Police Officer Howie Lake and Blaine Salamone arrived. Officer Lake was the first to arrive, with Officer Salamone arriving shortly thereafter. As the officers approached Mr. Sterling, he was apparently engaged in what appeared to be a transaction with two females. Arriving first, Officer Lake interrupted the transaction and gave Mr. Sterling instructions to place his hands on a vehicle parked nearby. Mr. Sterling does not comply with Officer Lake's instructions. Officer Lake then attempts to physically control Mr. Sterling's hands in an effort to place his hands on the vehicle. Officer Salamone, who arrives as Mr. Sterling is resisting Officer Lake's commands, attempts to assist Officer Lake in gaining control of Mr. Sterling's hands. During the initial struggle, while refusing to submit to the officer's request, Mr. Sterling spins around, pulls his right arm away from Officer Salamone, and at that point, Officer Salamone draws his firearm from his holster and gives Mr. Sterling a loud, aggressive verbal command and threatens to shoot him if he does not comply. This level of verbal escalation appears to momentarily be effective as the officers are able to direct Mr. Sterling to the vehicle and attempt to place him in custody. During this portion of the event, Officer Salamone's weapon remained trained on Mr. Sterling at arm's length. Despite the aggressive, purposeful tone of Officer Salamone, Mr. Sterling again begins to resist as Officer Lake continues his attempt to again gain control of Mr. Sterling's hands after he was directed to the vehicle. Failing to gain control of Mr. Sterling, Officer Salamone steps away from Mr. Sterling and takes a defensive position while keeping his weapon drawn on Mr. Sterling. At this point, Officer Salamone instructs Officer Lake to tase him. Officer Lake then steps away from Mr. Sterling, deploys his taser with little effect. Mr. Sterling momentarily falls to his knees, but continues to be non-compliant, then stands and faces Officer Lake. Officer Salamone again instructs Officer Lake to tase him again for the second time. The second deployment of the taser has no effect. After observing Mr. Sterling being tased twice with little or no effect, Officer Salamone holsters his weapon and tackles Mr. Sterling as Mr. Sterling continued to face Officer Lake. As Officer Salamone tackles Mr. Sterling, they both fall to the ground, with Officer Salamone landing on top of Mr. Sterling near and partially under a parked car. A struggle then takes place on the ground as Officer Salamone attempts to control Mr. Sterling's right arm while Officer Lake kneels down next to Mr. Sterling and attempted to control his left arm. In discussing these events, we must be mindful that what I'm describing took place very quickly and involved two officers who had good reason to believe that Mr. Sterling was armed with a firearm and that he was continuously resisting. While engaged in a struggle, Officer Salamone is heard saying, "He's got a gun," or something to that effect. Throughout the struggle on the ground, both officers continuously try to gain control of Mr. Sterling's hands while he actively resists. Next, Officer Salamone is observed attempting to remove his handgun from his holster and says, "If you move, I swear to God," or words to that effect. At this point, no shots are fired. While the officers continue to struggle, Mr. Sterling, Officer Salamone can be heard excitedly saying, "He's got a gun." At this point, no shots are fired. It should be noted that during this portion of the struggle, Mr. Sterling was positioned in a manner that concealed his lower right half of his body, and more particularly, his right front pocket. As the struggle continues, several more attempts to control Mr. Sterling's hands are made. Officer Salamone then can be heard loudly saying, "He's going for the gun." Officer Salamone then fires 3 shots into the chest of Mr. Sterling and rolls slightly away from him, keeping his handgun trained on Mr. Sterling. At this point, Officer Lake appears to stand and point his handgun at Mr. Sterling, providing cover for Officer Salamone, who was on the ground and in close proximity to Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling then quickly sits up and rolls to his left, away from Officer Salamone. It is important to note that as Mr. Sterling rolled away from Officer Salamone, his hands and his right side appeared to be concealed from the view of both officers. As Mr. Sterling attempts to get up, Officer Salamone fires 3 additional shots in the back of Mr. Sterling. These shots incapacitate Mr. Sterling. Officer Lake then quickly approaches Mr. Sterling and removes a loaded .38 caliber handgun from his right front pocket. These are the facts. This investigation included an examination and a re-examination of all evidence provided by the federal government, including witness statements, photographs, video evidence, original and enhanced, toxicology reports, the use of force, export reports, and other types of evidence. As you can imagine, the amount of material generated by the United States Department of Justice over the course of a 10-month investigation was voluminous. Once our office was satisfied that the federal materials were thoroughly reviewed and analyzed, we initiated a further state investigation into the evidence provided. Our investigation included, among other actions, contacting independently the eyewitnesses to the event to review their description of the event, to determine if any additional information could have been gathered or evaluated. Again, we went out and re-interviewed all of the witnesses to the event that we were able to contact. Let me be very clear. Our objective was to conduct a full and thorough examination of the evidence obtained from the federal government before any additional investigative steps were taken, and certainly before any conclusions were drawn. This process was to be conducted irrespective of any pressure to come to a quick conclusion. Not in this investigation or any other do we sacrifice completeness for speed. Our investigation has concluded that Officers Lake and Salamone attempted to make a lawful arrest of Alton Sterling based upon probable cause. During that encounter, Mr. Sterling continued to resist. Each expert was selected by the U.S. Department of Justice. Each independently concluded that both officers acted in a reasonable and justifiable manner in the shooting death of Mr. Sterling. Career staff members of the U.S. Department of Justice came to the same conclusion after the federal investigation relative to federal law. In drawing our conclusion, the Louisiana Department of Justice has considered all of the evidence compiled by the U.S. Department of Justice, the opinions of independent experts used by the U.S. Department of Justice, our independent investigation and review, including our own independent direct interview of eyewitnesses in every aspect of the applicable laws. As with every criminal case, we must analyze the evidence, the law, and the facts, and then draw a conclusion. But we are always mindful of the human element. I know the Sterling family is hurting. I know that they may not agree with this decision. I'm ever mindful that a mother who prematurely loses a son, a child who loses a father, experiences a pain that no one should ever have to endure. I'm asking that everyone consider the family in the coming days and spend their time and energy in lifting them up rather than creating further division. I pray that God blesses and keeps the Sterling family through this difficult time, and I thank you for your attention today.
Mr. Attorney General, will you be releasing the video that the community is calling on you to release?
We will now be
surveillance video.
We will now be issuing the reports. They will also be available online on our website and shortly on Facebook.
Will you be releasing the video?
The public records request now? The file under it?
Yeah.
All right, guys, we'll bring you back into the newsroom after playing out that piece from the news conference from this morning on that was a Louisiana Attorney General kind of speaking about why they did not find any criminal charges in that investigation.
Right.
I know today's stream has been really heavy with these stories, guys. We went back over to Sacramento to talk about Stephon Clark's case. And then Sam, the web producer here,
hello.
You kind of briefly wrote up the AP copy of this case.
Yeah, we've been following this story for a bit. Yeah, it's been just interesting that the family also spoke after the charges were made, and they were very emotional after all of this. So yeah,
I saw that this morning. So if you guys were on our stream earlier, we did quickly bring that up live when the family came out of this, whatever this was, Louisiana courthouse or wherever this is being held, and they had some words for the media live. So at the beginning of our stream, we took that in, and it was emotional.
Yeah, it was just
these are tough cases.
Yeah, every time this happens, it's definitely like an interesting conversation, and definitely one that needs to keep on happening. I mean, I covered a lot of the Freddie Gray stuff when I was working in Baltimore, and a lot of the the officers didn't face charges for that incident as well. So
that was big.
Yeah, and it also depends on. I mean, these kinds of issues are prevalent across the country, so it's interesting to see how in Baltimore and then in Missouri and. In Louisiana.
How they deal with, as you can see, we've seen this today in Louisiana and then over in California, Sacramento as well. So kind of a heavy day for these types of cases, but hopefully we'll have some more happy, interesting, news for you guys tomorrow. But it just all depends on what's going on. And these are two big stories right now. But other than that, Sam, anything else kind of on your mind as we go into the 2 o'clock hour here? We'll kind of roll out our stream shortly, but
yeah, well, we're going to be seeing the next update from the White House. Seeing what's going on with that. There's been a lot of conversation about the Russia investigation in relation to Facebook, with Cambridge Analytica, and actually I think there's been some new news that Mark Zuckerberg is going to testify about it. So there's been some more developments going on in that. So we're curious to see what. I don't know if it's Sarah Sanders that's speaking today.
I don't know either.
Yesterday it was another guy.
I know it was, but I think likely we may end up taking that to our Facebook page. So
yeah, we should be doing that
heads up
shortly.
For that, and it takes a second for them to come up, but sometimes they're a little late, but you just never know. But anyway, that's what we got going on this Tuesday. Kind of a
there's a lot of different a lot going on in different ways.
Yeah. So anyway, nice to bring Sam in, kind of talk about what the web is going through today, and we'll have more for you guys tomorrow, Wednesday on our stream as we go through this week, this last full week of March, which is crazy.
It went by fast.
It did. We're going into spring, even though it's been super cold. I know Tucker Barnes, our meteorologist, was saying it hasn't even hit 60 in the whole month of March. So we've had 28 days of not even 60 degrees. We had a couple random warm days in February, and if you guys are local, you know what I'm talking about, but if not, this is irrelevant to you. But either way, it's been a cold one, so we're kind of still facing winter over here in DC, but hopefully we roll into spring coming up, and cherry blossoms are around the corner, so hopefully
we've been watching. They pushed back the days for the Cherry Blossom Festival. The opening ceremony was on Sunday instead of Saturday because of March for Our Lives, and I think they just announced that it went. The blossoms went into stage 4.
Oh, okay.
First stage. There's like 6 stages.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
I know. Well, we'll have some live coverage of that, of course, as we have events for cherry blossoms. Hopefully, if they do bloom as they're expecting.
Yeah, they're expecting. I think April 5th.
I was hearing 8 through 12,
oh,
but
maybe it was later than that. Okay.
Yeah, unless they've changed it. I don't know. But we can just see when the weather comes up. So I'm not quite sure. All right, with that, guys, we'll take it out and continue our coverage on our digital platforms. As always, you can follow us, fox5dc.com, our Facebook page as well, Fox5DC, and we're working on Twitter and everything else too.
Yeah.
Sam, you're working on some stories today?
Yes.
Into the afternoon?
Yeah, we've been working on, there was a big fire here in Maryland, and that 2 children were killed in that, so we've been following the latest on that. And there was also some new charges that were brought out. I'm sorry, there was a teacher that was facing some charges for having having contact with students in Southern Maryland as well. And he looks like he's been sentenced to a long time in prison for that. And what else are we working on? The Alton Sterling case and whatever's going on in the White House and a lot of local news.
But, we'll see what becomes of this White House press briefing. Again, if you want to catch that, if we are streaming it to our Facebook, you can catch it there.
Should be, yep.
And we'll go with that. So, all right, more to come, guys, on Fox 5 Live this week. We'll catch you this week.
Yes.
All right. See ya.